Alrighty, welcome back to my Mesmer guide. This is Mr. Prometheus, and as promised, part 2 is going to go over the build that I had chosen. So I'm here in Ore, and I'm ready to show the build off, and then I'm going to go kill some stuff, and you can see what is going on. So without further ado, let's take a look at what it is. So it is 20, 30, 20, with the loadout of a staff, a sword, and a focus. Now this is flexible. You can certainly do something else if you want, but I believe that this particular loadout is going to be the strongest loadout that you have access to for leveling up. I'm currently using a power, vitality, condition damage set of gear. Everything that I have is pretty much as much condition damage and various other stats, but mostly power. These happen to have precision and toughness. Unfortunately, I need to get some more gear here. So my gear isn't even really perfect. It's not certainly top tier. The only exotic level 80 item I have is this staff here, and that's because the staff is the most important feature of this particular build. So let's look at it. In Domination, Domination adds power and condition duration. So the duration is important and power is important. Illusion of vulnerability, this doesn't really matter too much. I don't tend to interrupt my targets really at all, so this just happens to be here. But the first thing that we're going to really look at is Crippling Dissipation, which means that clones cripple nearby foes when they're killed. So when you're playing staff, as I've discussed, you want to be using a bunch of clones, and they usually will tank for you in some capacity. So when they're tanking for you, you want to be able to kite, and if they die, which they will often, you want to make sure that your clones do something beneficial when they pass away, and Crippling Dissipation is perfect for that so that you can continue to kite mobs. Dazzling, again, not really that big of a deal. If you happen to use the Daze Shatter, and we'll go over the shatters in a little bit, then this might be good, but I don't particularly care. I don't really use this either. And then you do Mental Torment for Mind Rack, causing additional damage. The reason why you choose this is because when the mob gets low and you have a bunch of clones up and maybe some phantasms, you want to just shatter them and get the fight over with, because you're going to lose them anyway, so you might as well end the fight sooner rather than later. In Chaos, which adds toughness and boon duration is very good with things like Chaos Storm and Chaos Armor, because the protection, regeneration, swiftness, or swiftness, retaliation, and Aegis last longer, which is really helpful. And toughness is always a nice thing to have for leveling up and taking damage. Metaphysical rejuvenation is very strong in this particular build. When you hit 75%, you get 10 seconds of regeneration, so that's nice. And the boon duration is going to be a little bit longer than that, actually, so it's really going to be 13 seconds. Debilitating Dissipation is very similar to Crippling Dissipation, and that says that clones apply a random condition to nearby foes when they're killed. The concept behind this is the same, is that you want to essentially apply random conditions and cripple your enemies when your clones die, and essentially you want them to tank for you, so this is very, very helpful. Illusionary Membrane is very solid, actually, as well. You gain protection when you gain regeneration. So if you go to 75%, you get 10 seconds of regeneration, and then 2 seconds of protection at the same time. So nice little bonus. Illusionary Defense, 3% reduced damage for each illusion you have in the world. When you're fighting a normal fight, you're not shattering during the course of the fight. You only shatter to end the fight. So when you are up against several mobs, which this build is very good at pulling several mobs, taking 9% or up to 9% less damage is really, really good. Chaotic Transference happens to be a nice little bonus. 5% of your toughness given as a bonus to condition damage. So, it adds a little toughness, and also the next thing that we pick, Chaotic Dampening, adds toughness as well. So this is just nice. It's just nice to have. Chaotic Dampening is sort of the bread and butter of this particular talent build, however, and that's because it not only adds toughness when wielding a staff or trident, but it reduces the recharge of staff skills by 20%. And that's very important, especially because you want to use phased retreat very, very often to keep your clone supply at a very high level. Additionally, I understand that I didn't go over the underwater weapons in my first video, and I know that this mentions the trident here. I didn't go over them because you don't really get a choice. You basically just use 2, and that's really it. I will touch on them probably at some point in the future, but it wasn't really the focus of the video, and they're fairly simple to figure out. Just summon the phantasms on them, essentially, and then go to town. Illusions, this increases condition damage, so this is very helpful when you're in a build that is reliant on condition damage. And it says increases shredding recharge rate. That means the shatters. So basically your shatters cool down quicker. Now let's just go over them really quickly. We've got Mind Rack, and what Mind Rack does is, as we touched on in the first video, more damage per illusion, which is very helpful. And they just basically run in and kill themselves. Cry of Frustration adds a stack of confusion for every single clone or phantasm that was shattered, so that can be helpful. It's usually used in place of Mind Rack if Mind Rack is on cooldown and you want to summon something and you don't want to wipe something away, so you want to use the advantage of having a shatter. Cry of Frustration can be used. Diversion is probably the least used shatter, which is destroy all of your clones and phantasms, dazing their targets. As we covered, daze is a 1 second, not quite interrupt, but it is a 1 second essentially stop all action on the target. Everything goes on cooldown and you can't do anything. So it can be used to interrupt abilities. And then there's Distortion. Now Distortion is very, very strong. It makes you invulnerable for every clone or phantasm that you shattered, and this is situational but essential to have. So in illusions, increasing the shredding recharge rate reduces the cooldown on all of these shatters, which means you can shatter more often. It's a nice bonus. You're really in it for the condition damage and the talent points. Precise Rack is here so that, similarly to Mental Torment, so that you can crit a little more and end a fight sooner so that you can get onto the next one. Additionally, when you're pulling a large group of mobs, you can Mind Rack into all of them, and it's an AoE, so it will hit all of them. This is very, very helpful because you often have several guys all standing next to each other. Illusionary Retribution is also very good. I'm not really going into this tree for this ability. However, Illusionary Retribution, what it does is it says all shatter skills inflict confusion. So everything is Cry of Frustration, essentially, in addition to its normal effect. Now, Cry of Frustration then adds double the amount of confusion. I've seen confusion tick for 2,000 damage in this build, so it can be very, very good. But again, as we've covered, confusion is not that reliable in PvE. And then finally, Illusionary Elasticity, and this needs some demonstration. And you'll notice, by the way, that I haven't gone over the 5-point Illusionist Celerity, and I will go over that in a minute. I did not forget it. So normally, and as we've seen, when you go out and fight something, the bounce on the Winds of Chaos will go from you to an enemy and back to you. So it'll give the enemy a condition and give you a boon. This doesn't apply to any... the bouncing attacks have an additional bounce. Illusionary Elasticity does not apply to your clones, but it does apply to you. And what that means is that when you throw Winds of Chaos at something, it bounces from you back... Oh, this guy just teleported all over the place, but it still should work here. It bounces from you back and forth. So it's as if you cast 2, essentially, which is extremely helpful. It essentially doubles up your production of Winds of Chaos, which means that you build Might Stacks and Fury faster, and you can see that actually the amount of bleeds that were happening there was pretty high and burning. So in conjunction with having several clones up, so we can basically put a bunch of clones up and then use this ability and stand next to this guy. It starts off kind of slow, and sometimes you'll get some vulnerability, but you can see that how fast, and I'm not even really microing myself here, but you can see how fast this actually kills mobs. Which is really, really helpful. I really think that the bouncing attacks, having an additional bounce, is one of the strongest staff-related skills. Incidentally, it also makes the Greatsword number 2 Mirror Blade ability bounce another time as well, which is nice, but not that needed. You also just saw me use mirror images here, so I'm going to touch on my utilities in just a second, but let's go back to the one trait that I missed, which is Illusionist Celerity, which says illusion summoning skills recharge 20% faster. So as we've covered, illusions are both clones and phantasms. In addition to chaotic dampening, which reduces the staff recharge rate of skills already. So for example, Phase Retreat starts off as a 10-second cooldown. It goes down to 8 when you have chaotic dampening, and when you pick Illusionist Celerity, it doesn't show it, but let me just target this mob and cast, look down here, Phase Retreat. It's actually 5 seconds. It's a 5-second cooldown. So you end up with a much shorter cooldown on Phase Retreat. Additionally, Phantasmal Warlock, you saw, went down to 10 seconds from 14. So the Phantasmal Warlock cools down even faster, which is also quite amazing. And I actually just killed that mob without even looking at it, just by summoning some guys and auto-attacking on it, and I barely even had to blink an eye. So both of your illusion summoning abilities are cooled down quicker when you pick 5 points in Illusionist Celerity. It's so good that I recommend every single Mesmer, no matter what you're doing, pick this talent. It's 5 points, just pick it, because it is actually that strong. And there are talents in the first tier that can be decent, but the only really good one is Precise Rack. So even if you're not going to put all of your talents into illusions, pick Illusionist Celerity. It is that good. It's also that good because, for example, Mirror Images is a clone spell, and it goes down to 36 seconds rather than 45, which is amazing. So, and not only that, but there's Decoy, which is on a, and then Decoy, which is on a 40-second cooldown, goes down to 32. If you wanted to use some of the Phantasmal Disenchanter or Defenders, these guys cool down quicker too. So this Phantasm is on a 16-second cooldown that removes boons from foes and conditions from allies. Touching on that, I actually prefer No Field for that. The reason why, and you saw if you were watching my first video, I touched on No Field there. It's an ethereal combo field, which means that you can phase retreat out of it and get yourself Chaos Armor. It lasts a little bit longer, and it clears a condition right away. You don't have to worry about it dying like you do when you're worrying about the Phantasm. So I prefer No Field for all of those reasons. And having an extra ethereal combo field on top of the staff, which also you can phase retreat out of Chaos Storm for the same reason. And then finally we pick Blink, and Blink is just in case, it's for two reasons. The first reason is just in case you get caught doing something that you shouldn't be doing. If you get crippled or if you get slowed down and mobs are all on you, then blinking is really, really helpful. You can get away. It also breaks stun, which is fantastic. And there's another reason why you choose Blink, and that's because the phase retreat is kind of buggy right now, and you can teleport yourself into the ground in some terrains, and that's really, really frustrating. And if you're good at placing the reticle on the world, you can actually blink back out of the ground without having to use a waypoint and waste money. So having Blink available to you, and if you're in combat, if a mob is trying to hit you while you're under the earth, you'll stay in combat, so you can't waypoint anyway, and you have to log out, and it's just a mess. So Blink is actually good for that reason as well. For soloing, I choose Moamorph, and the reason why is because if I get overwhelmed, I can Moa something and not worry too much about it killing me. I don't use Mass Invisibility. I also sometimes will use Time Warp if I'm in a dungeon, and that brings me to the dungeon aspect of this particular build. You can switch the build around for dungeons, but before we do that, let's just talk really quickly about the offhanded weapons. You see, I didn't really pick any traits that have to deal with these, but I picked the sword because it has a leap on it, which means I can get Chaos Armor out of an ethereal combo field. So even without having the staff available or equipped, I can give myself Chaos Armor, which is really nice. As we've mentioned, Blurred Frenzy is very good offensively and defensively, so if something attacks you and closes with you, you can Blurred Frenzy and get yourself out, then maybe blink away and you should be safe. And I choose the Focus because when you're soloing, you want to be able to get around the world pretty quick, so Temporal Curtain's good for that. And if you're in a dynamic event, the Phantasmal Warden does a lot of damage. Additionally, if you're good at rounding up mobs, with Swiftness, you can round up a bunch of mobs, stand in the middle, drop a Chaos Storm on your head, switch to the Focus, and drop the Phantasmal Warden. And as we've discussed with the Phantasmal Warden, it does the most DPS of any Mesmer Phantasm in the game, as long as it's able to stay up. And if you drop it inside of a Chaos Storm, it will block a whole bunch of attacks and not get one-shot by all the mobs, so you get a lot of damage and use out of that. So that's the reason why we use the Focus for leveling. When you go to a dungeon, you can use this build in a dungeon. All you have to do is make a couple changes. You can change this to Torch. Now, the reason why we change, actually we don't use the Cripple here. So Mind Rack, you still want to have Mind Rack causing 20% damage. You get rid of the Clone's Cripple, and the reason why is because you're not really kiting in dungeons, really. It's not a thing. So you want to keep the Mind Rack available because that's still very strong, but you can change it to Torch skills remove conditions. So if I throw a Torch on really quickly, which, there it is, then what you can do is in a dungeon group, you can lay an ethereal combo field down, switch, and then use the Prestige, and that gives an AoE Chaos Armor to these nice guards here, and maybe not Dathar. I guess Dathar doesn't get Chaos Armor, but you can give your group Chaos Armor, which is very strong. I think the Torch is very good for this reason. It's the only blast finisher in the Mesmer's toolkit, so that's why I would use it. It also blinds everything in the area, so if you're in a big pull, you can use it to blind everything, keeping your guys safe, and then you can use the Prestige to shoot off a Chaos Armor to everybody. So cooling the Prestige down to 24 seconds is really useful because Chaos Storm is also on a 24-second cooldown, and that's only because you've picked Cleansing Conflagration for the Torch and Chaotic Dampening. Additionally, you can come down here and change Precise Rack if you want to. You can change it to Compounding Power for 3% more damage for each of your active illusions. You can also change Illusionary Defense if you want to, let's see, where is it here? Let's see. The activating a Signet removes a condition. If you want to go like a Signet build for condition damage, for example, if you want to pick Signet of Domination and have it a little bit of CC, Signet of Domination also improves your condition damage. You have the option to do that. So the spec is actually very flexible for both PvE solo and PvE dungeon runs. I tend to pick the same utilities, actually, though I don't pick a Signet. The one change that I make to utilities for dungeons is I pick Feedback. And what Feedback does is on a ranged mob, and there aren't really any here, but I will show you this a clip of this. If you cast it on a target, what it does is it puts a dome around them, and actually I don't think I'll aggro a mob if I do this, but it puts a dome around them that reflects all projectiles. Oh, it's working on this guy. That's perfect. So if he tries to shoot at me, it reflects all the damage back to the source. Feedback's actually very, very strong in World versus World particularly, but it's also amazingly solid in dungeons when you are up against ranged mobs that turret damage into your face. You can shut them off for a short period of time with Feedback, and since mobs do so much damage in dungeons, the Feedback is actually extremely strong in that scenario. So I highly recommend Feedback. Sometimes MOA can be used in dungeons as well, just a question of your preference. If you want to run a more CC-oriented build, MOA is good, although Time Warp is really, really good for your team. That 10 seconds of quickness is the most quickness that anyone can get in the game, and that's on the Mesmer Elite here. Additionally, it's a very large reticle, and Time Warp is an ethereal combo field, so you can blast it with the torch, or you can leap out of it, whatever you want to do. So Time Warp gives you access to another ethereal combo field, which is really fantastic. So that's the build. Let's look at some real world examples besides what I've just shown you, and we can go into a little bit of nuance on how to play it. So quickly, before we do anything else, I just want to show you what Feedback can do in a dungeon. This was us in Ara. This is the first time I've ever done it, and we were in a pug, and people were running into this Orion Eye and getting themselves killed. So I just ran up and cast Feedback on it, and it ended up killing itself, which was pretty surprising, and everyone was really impressed by it. So this is what Feedback can do. I just wanted to throw this in there before we moved on. So now looking at a real world example or two, this is me just attacking a couple mobs in I have a couple clones on the first mob, and then I went and got it on the second one. Always Chaos Storm on your clones. It's definitely better, and you'll see some blocks pop up when the clones get targeted. I am focusing down the first one here, and just come into Shatter, which hits both of them, use the sword really quickly, and bring these guys down. So not that hard, pretty easy stuff, and also not that impressive, so let's go try something harder. So here I am going after an Abomination and a couple of grubs. I have my Phantasmal Warlock tanking the Abomination, and I throw a Chaos Storm on it so that it starts blocking. And you can see that it actually is able to take a couple extra hits from that, which is kind of nice. I come in there to sort of distract it a little bit, get another Warlock up because I know that one's going to die. I do have all of my clones and the Warlock on the Abomination right now. I use the line there from the focus to pull the grubs around and let that mob die. Then what you see here is I shatter everything because the Abomination was dying, and then these two grubs are really close to each other, and you can see this additional bounce trait is doing lots of damage to both of them, and I'm actually getting them down both at around the same time. So that's just a display as to how good that additional bounce can be. It doesn't need to bounce off of you, it will bounce off of other mobs too. So now it's time to turn up the volume a little bit, and we're going to pull a bunch of big guys. We're going to pull some gorillas and some Abominations and have a little party with it. So I got these guys coming at me over here, and basically I'm choosing a good spot and putting Chaos Storm down and getting my heap of clones up. Now you can see that the blocking is happening on my clones, and I dodge roll away and put Chaos Armor on myself before I decide to melee. I missed there because I'm targeting the wrong Abomination, but I was still invulnerable, so it was not that bad. You can see how fast this spec actually kills things. I put the cripple line down here from the focus just to slow this guy down a little bit, come in for the sword, swing a little bit, and you can see that his friend has decided to come in as well and kill my Phantasm, which is fine. I'm going to put a Chaos Storm down again. This time I'm going to leap out of it so that I can give myself Chaos Armor. And I'm basically just going to kite. This guy's has no prayer, essentially, and he's going for a clone, which means that when he kills it, he's going to get crippled, and he's going to be nice and slow for me. So I'm able to actually continue the pull because he's going for clones, and actually this gorilla doesn't even really know what it's doing. It was trying to leash, I suppose, which was just nice and advantageous. And you can see the bounce back from me is putting lots of conditions on that grub. So I know that grub's going to die, and I just kind of let that happen and pull another. So you can really just sort of chain pull with this build as long as you're cognizant of where your clones are and which enemies that they are attacking. And finally, we are going to be left with an example of when everything isn't going like Magical Christmas Land and you don't play perfectly. So here I'm just trying to pull as many guys as I can, so I'm running around, putting a long shot on that guy. I don't think I'm going to hit him, but tried to get him in group as well. Now these gorillas, they cripple. And because you get crippled, it's a very long cripple, and that allows them to get in on you. So I'm trying to get this guy down as far as I can before this gorilla comes to me. And you'll notice that I overextend here and need to use Distortion to shatter. So I Distortion here and shatter everything to get away from them. And I see that they're still coming, so I drop the cripple line for myself and put a null field down so that I cannot be crippled anymore. My Phantasm is also going to do some damage there. And I'm basically just going to hide next to my Phantasm so that when it comes, I can put a Chaos Storm down and let my Phantasm do the work for me. So this is a good example of when you want to use something like the Distortion Shatter. And making decisions like this is actually what is going to put you above other Mesmers, is exactly that. So what I would recommend you do is play this and try as hard as you can to put yourself in difficult situations, because putting yourself in difficult situations is actually going to make you a better player rather than just taking it easy all the time. And you might die a couple of times, but you get a really good handle on what the build is capable of. Similarly, we can look at this next clip also, which has something to do with how Blink is used. So here I am in a very, very large pull, but I have a pretty good handle on it. I have Chaos Storm up, I still have Aegis, so I use the sword and then block the next attack, put down Temporal Curtain from the focus here, and just continue on. The Phantasm's doing good damage. I throw a Shatter out there, but then I notice that this gorilla comes in out of kind of left field. I don't see it. And I start getting hit by these guys because my dodge roll is down. So you can see that this gorilla comes in right here, and I need to blink. So I blink away there just to get some distance and then throw a Chaos Storm down. I'm going to rewind that so you can see it again. So let's just put a rewind on this. So as we back up, you can see that the Chaos Storm is actually pretty effective, especially when you and mobs are in it. So here's the moment of the blink, and I'm slowing it down a little bit. Then I blink away. And you have to identify these scenarios for yourself. And really understand that the blink is sort of, since it's on a longer cooldown, about 30 seconds, you get one shot at it. And you don't really need to blink that far, as you see. I blinked, barely 2 feet, I guess. But it was enough to get away from them, and that's really what's important. I got crippled there, so I had used Null Field. And again, these grubs are pretty easy to take down. So overall, I do believe that this build is one of the stronger builds available for leveling purposes, and it's extremely versatile and helpful in dungeons. I really want you guys to give it a shot. Let me know what you think. So again, thank you very much for watching. I appreciate it, and leave comments and give me feedback, because I can only get better. Thanks.